Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we are taking apart a massive, culturally ingrained financial myth, piece by piece. For decades, we've all been meticulously taught to worship a very specific, very shiny number. Hitting six figures, whether we're talking about an annual salary or a savings account balance, has been drilled into us as the ultimate financial finish line. It's the absolute gold standard of success. But today, we're going to completely dismantle that illusion. We're going to dig into the macroeconomic realities, the hidden behavioral psychology traps, and the ruthless mathematics of inflation to help you understand what your money actually means. Because let me tell you, chasing round numbers just because they sound impressive is a guaranteed way to stall your financial progress. It's time to completely reframe how we view wealth building. And by the end of this, you'll see exactly why the old rules just don't apply anymore. To truly understand how deep this illusion goes, I want to start with a story. Sarah just got the notification. She's a graphic designer who had been aggressively saving and investing for 8 long years. She lived with roommates way longer than she wanted to, she drove a car with a broken air conditioner, and she skipped countless vacations. And then it happened. Her retirement account finally crossed 6 figures, $100,247 to be exact. Like anyone would after nearly a decade of sacrifice, she took a screenshot. She almost texted her sister to celebrate. And then she just sat there on our couch for a second, waiting to feel it. She was waiting for the thing everyone promises you'll feel, that overwhelming whoosh of arrival, the feeling of finally making it. She expected this deep, satisfying physiological wave of ultimate security to just wash over her. And instead, she felt absolutely nothing. Okay, maybe there was a tiny, fleeting flicker of excitement, but that was it. The massive wave of relief never came. Then, a few minutes later, reality completely intruded. She opened her banking app to check if she could actually afford to buy a new set of tires for her car. A full set, plus the alignment and installation, was going to cost her nearly $1,200. Instantly, that familiar knot of financial anxiety returned right back to her stomach, and that tiny flicker of achievement evaporated completely. Now, something is clearly broken in this scenario, but here's the secret. The problem isn't Sarah, and the problem certainly isn't her saving habits. The problem is the psychological weight we assign to the number itself. The problem is the number, and just how dangerously out of touch that number is with our modern economic reality. So here is our roadmap for today. First, the six-figure illusion. Second, the invisible wealth thief. Third, finish line versus starting line. And finally, the new wealth metric. Section 1. The six-figure illusion and why round numbers completely trick our brains. So, hit 6 figures and you've finally arrived. That's the pervasive message, right? It's in the movies we watch, it's baked into the classic career advice from previous generations, and it's the benchmark almost every finance influencer on the internet uses as the ultimate "you made it" milestone. We love it because it feels incredibly clean. It feels like a goal with a neat little ribbon tied around it. But the psychology behind why we worship this specific number is actually a well-documented cognitive trap. It's known as round number bias. You see, our human brains are fundamentally wired to crave cognitive ease. We are constantly looking for patterns and mental shortcuts to make sense of a chaotic world. But the truth is, $100,000 isn't a threshold that the universe respects. It's simply a threshold our brains respect because it has a nice, even shape. We see this everywhere in daily life. It's the exact reason why retail prices are set at $99.99. Our brains categorize it differently than a flat 100. It's why runners will literally push themselves to the point of exhaustion to finish exactly 5.0 miles on a treadmill instead of stopping at 4.8 miles. We artificially assign profound meaning to the shape of the zeros, but mathematically, it doesn't hold any actual authority over your financial life. I want you to think about $100,000 like a vintage picture frame. Back in the 1980s, that frame was forged in shiny gold and it clearly stated $100,000 equals wealthy in bold letters. And the picture inside that frame used to be incredibly vibrant. It depicted a very comfortable middle-class existence. We're talking a nice 3-bedroom house, 2 reliable cars in the driveway, fully funded college accounts, and a guaranteed yearly family vacation. Now, fast forward 40 years, that heavy gold frame hasn't been resized at all. It still sits proudly on the mantle, still loudly claiming that 6 figures equals undeniable wealth. But the picture inside that frame, what that specific amount of money actually buys and the lifestyle it actually represents today, has been quietly, persistently shrinking the entire time. The comfortable house has been replaced by a cramped apartment, and the yearly vacations have completely vanished. But we're all still standing around, desperately admiring the shiny gold frame, entirely ignoring the fact that the picture inside has deteriorated right in front of our eyes. Which brings us to Section 2,
the invisible wealth thief and the silent erosion of your money.
All right, prepare yourself, because here is the uncomfortable mathematical truth. The $100,000 that meant you made it to your parents' generation is fundamentally not the same money sitting in your savings account today. We really need to look at the massive difference in historical purchasing power. Let's look at real estate as the prime example, since it's basically the cornerstone of middle-class wealth. In the 1990s, the median home price in the United States was roughly $120,000. Having $100,000 meant you could practically buy an entire house in cash, or at the very least, put down a monumental down payment that made your monthly mortgage practically invisible. Today, the median home price is well over $400,000, and in major metropolitan areas, it's frequently double that. $100,000 today in a lot of major cities barely covers the required 20% down payment, the closing costs, and the moving trucks. Same number, wildly different power. The number didn't get worse. What it can actually buy did. This is the part people miss because it's completely invisible. Nobody sends you a notice saying, hey, by the way, your money is worth less than it was last year. Let's actually do the math here. Say you've got an incredibly impressive $100,000 saved today, sitting untouched in a basic checking or low-yield savings account. We can apply a fundamental mathematical principle called the rule of 72 to understand what happens next. You simply divide 72 by the annual inflation rate to see how long it takes for inflation to cut your purchasing power in half. If inflation runs at a completely normal, boring 3% a year, 72 divided by 3 equals 24. That means in roughly 20 to 24 years, that same untouched $100,000 will only have the buying power of about $55,000. This wealth destruction happens in absolute silence. There's no dramatic stock market crash, no blaring news headlines. You just go to buy the same things you always buy, and somehow they cost more. You start to wonder if you're doing something wrong. You aren't. Time just quietly took a bite out of your money, and you didn't get the memo. Let's move to Section 3, finish line versus starting line, and the devastating cost of complacency. This is all about the behavioral psychology of what a round number does to your brain the exact moment you achieve it. When you treat that milestone as a finish line, crossing it triggers something incredibly dangerous: total complacency. Your brain releases a massive hit of dopamine, you relax, you think you've completed the hard part of financial survival, and you completely stop building. Let's compare two totally different mindsets over a 20-year timeline. Person 1, we'll call him Dave, hits the milestone, treats it as a safe finish line, and leaves it parked in a standard bank account. Over 20 years, as we just established with the rule of 72, inflation eats away at it, leaving him with a real-world purchasing power of about $55,000. Now person 2, let's call her Maya, hits the exact same number, but she actively treats it as a powerful starting line. She immediately invested in broad market index funds and leaves it alone to compound. Assuming a historically modest 7% average annual return, her money earns interest, and then that interest earns its own interest. 20 years later, without Maya adding another single dime of her own labor, she is sitting on roughly $387,000. The mathematical gap between Dave's decision to stop and Maya's decision to invest is nearly $330,000. And we have to ground that number in human reality. That is not just a spreadsheet error or a slight optimization mistake. That massive $330,000 gap is a completely paid-off house in many parts of the country. It's 4 to 5 years of early retirement completely funded. It's the full cost of university tuition for multiple children, paid in cash. That incredible loss of opportunity is the actual painful price tag of believing a round number is the destination. That is the literal cost of stopping to admire your bank balance instead of putting that capital to work in the broader economy. It's staggering when you look at it that way, isn't it? Because when you reach 6 figures and keep it invested, you fundamentally change your relationship with capitalism. You're generating real, tangible money without lifting a single finger. Historically, a diversified portfolio can comfortably yield or safely withdraw roughly 4 to 8% a year, depending on market conditions. That means your $100,000 is generating somewhere in the range of $7,000 to $8,000 a year simply by existing. Your money effectively becomes a second employee, and it's the best employee you'll ever have. It works weekends, it works holidays, it never sleeps, and it never calls in sick. It is generating a month or two of your living expenses entirely on its own. That is what a starting line of momentum truly is. It's the exact inflection point where your capital finally starts pulling its own substantial weight. Section 4. The new wealth metric. Why we need to focus on coverage over balance. Now you might be wondering, if 100,000 is an illusion, what specific number should you chase next? 250,000? A million? The truth is, chasing any specific dollar figure is just falling into the exact same trap. Swapping the dollar figure just builds the identical psychological illusion, merely with a heavier price tag. We need a completely different, mathematically sound way to measure wealth. Context is everything here. Take a 22-year-old recent graduate who splits cheap rent with 3 roommates, takes the bus, and has no dependents. Her monthly burn rate might be $2,000. For her, $100,000 is an absolute fortress of financial security. Now take a 45-year-old supporting a family of 4 in a high cost of living city. He has a heavy mortgage, exorbitant property taxes, and family health insurance premiums. His baseline monthly burn rate might be $10,000. For him, that exact same $100,000 is barely a 10-month cushion. The flat number by itself tells you absolutely nothing about financial health. The metric we should absolutely be obsessing over is your expense ratio. Calculating this requires a brief but vital personal financial audit. First, you need to determine your strict monthly burn rate. Look back at 3 months of bank statements and calculate exactly what it costs to keep your life running. Rent, groceries, utilities, basic insurance. Let's say that number is $4,000 a month. You then take your total accessible savings and divide it by that specific burn rate. That resulting number is your expense ratio. It literally translates to how many months of your actual life your account balance could cover if your income completely stopped tomorrow. $100,000 covering 4 months of heavily inflated expenses in a major tech hub is a wildly different reality than $100,000 covering 3 full years of a lean lifestyle in a smaller town. The real underlying currency of wealth is not total fiat dollars on a screen. It's the tangible freedom your money buys you, measured strictly in units of time. To successfully put this new perspective into practice, there are 3 actionable behavioral steps you must take. Step 1. Stop measuring your progress against arbitrary round numbers you inherited from pop culture and outdated financial advice. Unwire the 6-figure myth from your brain completely. Step 2. Start thinking strictly in terms of coverage. When you look at your portfolio, do not say, I have $100,000. Say, I have 25 months of absolute freedom. This mental shift changes everything about how secure you feel. Step 3. Resist spending your momentum. This requires leveraging behavioral finance tactics. When you cross a milestone, the psychological urge to celebrate by loosening your budget and upgrading your lifestyle is massive. The absolute best way to combat this is to automate your investments. If money automatically moves from your paycheck into index funds before you ever see it, you prevent the dopamine trigger that makes you want to buy a new car just because a zero was added to your balance. You have to actively resist spending against the very capital that just started working for you. Let's bring this entire journey full circle by going right back to Sarah. Remember how she felt that crushing sense of nothingness? Well, she didn't just impulsively upgrade her life to chase a dopamine high. Instead, she got incredibly curious about the underlying math. She sat down, audited her life, and calculated her real expense ratio. She factored in the reality that her money was mostly locked in a retirement account. If a catastrophic emergency forced her to cash it out early, she'd face a 10% early withdrawal penalty plus heavy federal and state income taxes. That meant her shiny $100,000 would immediately shrink to roughly $60,000 in usable liquid cash. Living in a highly expensive city with steep rent and medical costs, her baseline family burn rate was $12,000 a month. Dividing her $60,000 of accessible cash by her $12,000 burn rate gave her exactly 5 months of actual real-world freedom. 5 months. The math completely cured her confusion. She finally understood exactly why she didn't feel wealthy. It wasn't a finish line at all. It was just a highly effective 5-month safety net. Armed with that mathematical clarity, Sarah quietly let her money continue to aggressively compound in the background. I know it's incredibly difficult for the human brain to look at a massive pile of accumulated resources and fight the evolutionary urge to consume it. But building true generational wealth requires overriding that basic instinct. The compounding process itself is the ultimate reward, and compounding fundamentally requires being left entirely alone to do its job. Shifting from a balance mindset to a coverage mindset is the psychological key that allows you to leave it alone. You stop seeing a pile of cash waiting to be spent, and you start seeing an invisible shield of time protecting your future. Every single dollar you pull out of the market to celebrate an arbitrary round number milestone is a dollar that permanently stops multiplying for you. It's literally the equivalent of firing your best, hardest working employee just so you can throw a weekend party. So, we've broken down the cognitive trap of round number bias. We've exposed the silent, wealth-destroying nature of inflation, and we've replaced a meaningless dollar figure with the ultimate metric of time and coverage, which leaves you with one final essential question to ask yourself about your own financial trajectory. Are you keeping the camera rolling, or are you abruptly stopping to admire a single frame? $100,000 is just a snapshot. It is one fleeting frame in a much longer, much more complex financial movie. The only thing that actually matters for your long-term independence is that you ensure your financial story keeps moving forward the very day after you hit your milestone. Do not let your capital stop working just because your brain desperately likes the shape of the zeros on the screen. Keep the camera rolling and let your money do its job. Thanks for joining me for this Explain It, and I'll catch you in the next one.